we keep hearing about ego state, resource therapy, parts therapy. Please explain for us what is the difference between, or the main differences, if you will, between resource therapy and ego state therapy.
Okay. I started out when I first became a parts therapist as an ego state therapist, and I took on, I was greatly influenced by the writings and the work of John and Helen Watkins.
Yeah.
And their work in terms of working with a trauma, they would take the person back to the trauma and try to get the person to abreact and then have a fight or an encounter where they overpower the provocative factor.
Okay.
And in resource therapy, I started working like that, but then I changed to where, to me, the most important factor is, I believe, someone who has a state that is traumatized is carrying an illusion that the past is still present. Mm-hmm. So there's no need to fight.
Yeah.
The only need is to break that illusion. And so you go back to the initial sensitizing event in much the same way that an ego state therapist would.
Yeah.
But then you just merely have the person to say everything they would like to say to the provocative person, and we maybe shrink them down to 1 inch tall.
Okay.
So and we will say to them, we know they're not here. We're in a therapy room, so we can have them any size we want. Let's just shrink them down to 1 inch tall, and to make sure that the state that had been traumatized is allowed to express and learn experientially that there's nothing to fear. So that's a basic difference in ego state therapy working with trauma.
So you're not necessarily engaging that person, so to speak, but you actually taking more internal the whole
you're not,
process.
There's no fight.
Okay.
If in my view, the illusion that the past is still present needs to be broken. Mm-hmm. And if you fight the power of the past, that in a way is giving it power.
Yeah, yeah.
And so by assuming it has no power whatsoever, telling the client has no power, it doesn't even exist, and asking the client, now that we know that it's not even here and we can shrink it down, go ahead and say anything you want to it.
Yeah.
That experientially allows that part to understand that it has control, it has empowerment. Yeah. And another major reason between ego state therapy and resource therapy is how interjects are dealt with. A lot of ego state therapists believe that interjects are interjected into the personality and become ego states, become actual parts of the person. I believe that an interject is merely an internalized impression of another person. When we bridge back to an ISC, we never go to an interject. It always goes to a state. And to me, those are the real personality parts. And so I help clients to realize that the interjects that they may have been afraid of or may have been rejected by are past fragments, past illusions that they still exist. It may have happened in the past, it's not happening now, and so that helps the client become empowered in relation to the past. And I always say there's two kinds of fear. There's past fear and present fear. Past fear isn't needed. Present fear, you want to stay away from the edge of the cliff, that's good. But there's no need to carry any kind of past fear.
All right.
So, and as what I mentioned a bit earlier, ego state therapists believe that the personality has fragmented, has split off, and created different states. I believe that our states have evolved with the things that we've lived through. The coping skills that we've lived over and over again create our states. So I believe our states are built, and we all have very many states, and we want those states to be healthy and at peace internally.
So, from your description, it sounds like ego state therapy somehow comes very, very close to DID, right? To dissociated identity disorder.
Not really, no.
Well, because you see what I'm saying? Yeah, you see my point. You know, if somebody is diagnosed with that and with the DID, and if we take the description of ego state therapy, it kind of fits the description of DID.
No, the ego state therapists assume that we all have different parts, just
Yes.
like resource therapists do. DID is when those parts become isolated away from each other, and the communication ability of those parts to communicate with each other atrophies. Almost always, and I pretty much would say always, due to chronic child abuse.
Yeah.
And over time with chronic child abuse, there's an effort, I don't want to think about that, I don't want to think about that, I don't want to think about that. And so there's not a reviewing. When there's a switch of states from one state to another, there's not a reviewing of that, and the communication links between those states atrophies, causing DID, the multiple personality disorder. Now, ego state therapy is mainly using normal states. We all have different states.
Yeah.
We don't have to be DID to have different
Of
states.
course.
And so whether you're an ego state therapist or a resource therapist, most of the work is with normal states. Both ego state therapy and resource therapy are, I think, the most preferred therapies to work with DID, because we're already working with parts.
I'm going to ask you about that too. All right, thank you.